Right at my father's funeral, my husband slipped me a paper. Sign a waiver of inheritance in favor of my mother, or I'm filing for divorce. My mother-in-law watched with greedy impatience. I took the pen and calmly signed. But a week later, when they went to the notary, his words turned their faces to stone. Dear friends, before we begin, write in the comments what city or country you're from. Don't forget to subscribe and like. This really helps us. Enjoy listening. Helen sat by her father's bed, changing the damp cloth on his forehead. The gaunt, parchment yellow face was almost unrecognizable. Where was the strong, ironic man, former investigator Michael Warren, who could put any bully in his place with one look? Cancer was devouring him before her eyes, turning him into a fragile shadow. For the last 6 months, Helen had cared for him, juggling her job as a landscape designer, the house, and the hospital. She'd lost weight. Dark circles sat under her eyes. She didn't complain. It was her duty, her last chance to be with the person she loved most. Helen, honey. He pried his eyes open. His voice was a barely audible whisper. I'm here, Dad. I'm right here. She took his hot, dry hand. Take the folder in the desk drawer, he breathed, forcing out each word. Keep it for yourself and don't show it to anyone. Do you hear me? Until the time comes. You'll know when. Helen nodded silently, holding back tears. She found an ordinary cardboard folder in the old desk and slipped it into her bag without looking inside. There would be time for that later. That evening, when she returned to her mortgaged 2-room apartment in Yekaterinburg, she was met by her husband Stan and her mother-in-law, Alice Price, who had lately become a constant presence. How is he? Stan asked, kissing her cheek. He smelled of expensive cologne and a dinner his mother had obviously cooked. Bad, Helen answered softly. The doctor says it's a matter of days. Oh God, what a tragedy, Alice cried, stepping out of the kitchen. She wore Helen's apron and held a ladle like a scepter. A man like that, pure gold. Stan and I are so worried about you, dear. Helen went to the bathroom without responding. Their false sympathy made her sick. In recent months, every conversation with Stan and his mother ended the same way. They began by asking about her father's health and ended by discussing his property. Hell, did your dad say what he wants to do with that country house? Stan would ask casually. It's just sitting there. Maybe sell it. Pay off our mortgage. Stan, he's dying. Helen would cut him off. I'm just talking about the future. Our future, he'd insist. Alice, a former chief accountant, was more direct. Helen, you have to be practical. Emotions are fine, but life goes on. Your father has a nice apartment in the center, a house, a car, surely some savings. We should plan how to handle everything efficiently and not overpay taxes. Looking at their brisk, businesslike faces, Helen felt an icy wall rise between her and her husband. The man she'd loved and married 4 years ago seemed to have vanished, replaced by a calculating stranger who saw her family tragedy as a financial opportunity. They had married for love. Stan, a flashy auto dealership manager, knew how to impress. He courted beautifully and spoke of family values. Romantic, slightly naive, Helen believed him. From the beginning, her father had been wary of his son-in-law. He's empty, Hel, he'd said. A pretty facade with a draft behind it. And his mother's a vulture. Stay away from her. Helen hadn't listened. She was in love. Her father paid most of their down payment and helped with monthly installments when Stan had temporary problems at work. Stan and Alice accepted the help as their due. That night, after talking with her father, Helen sat in the kitchen sipping cold tea. Stan and his mother whispered animatedly in the living room. She couldn't catch the words, but she knew. They were skinning the bear that hadn't been killed yet. Her bear. The phone rang. She saw her father's doctor on the screen and went cold. Helen Warren, came the tired voice. Please come. Your father. He just... The phone slipped from her hand. The world shattered into 1,000 pieces. She didn't hear Stan come in, didn't hear his questions. She stared at one point while her father's last whisper rang in her ears. You'll know when. It seemed she was beginning to understand. The time had come, though she didn't yet know the cruel little play she would have to endure before the curtain rose. The hospital met her with official quiet and the sting of chlorine. Her father lay on the bed beneath a sheet, face covered. It was over. Helen stood frozen, a single thought pounding. I didn't get to tell him how much I love him. Stan and Alice arrived half an hour later. Alice wore all black, as if prepared. Her face wore a mask of grief, but her eyes darted, sharp and assessing. My poor girl, she whispered, hugging Helen, marble-cold arms. But we must be strong. There are things to do. And there were. Before the doctor could finish the death certificate, Alice had launched into action. We need Michael's documents, she told stunned Helen. Passport, insurance. Where are they? In the safe, in his study, Helen answered mechanically. Excellent. Stan, go with Helen to get them. I'll call the funeral home. Everything must be first class. Michael deserved it. At her father's apartment, Helen moved like a sleepwalker. She opened the safe and took out what they needed. Stan hovered, peering over her shoulder. What are these folders? He asked, pointing at neat stacks. The apartment? The house? Yes, Helen nodded. We should take those too, he said. Alice, who had somehow already arrived and was making herself tea in the kitchen, chimed in. So they don't get lost. Put them in a separate bag, son. We'll keep them for now. Safer with us. No. Helen's voice was unexpectedly firm. They stay here. Alice arched an eyebrow. You're not in a condition to make decisions, dear. You could lose or mix things up. I said no, Helen repeated, meeting her eyes. They're my father's things, and they stay in his home. Alice pursed her lips but said nothing, exchanging a meaningful glance with her son. Helen understood. They wouldn't give up. The next 2 days were a blur of people, calls, condolences. Helen barely slept, trying to organize the funeral, though Alice snatched the initiative at every step. Why such an expensive restaurant for the repast? She protested. The cafeteria across the street is cheaper. The dead don't care. The living still need money. My mom wanted it to be beautiful, Helen said quietly. I don't care what your mother wanted, Alice cut her off. We decide now. And they decided to economize. Stan sided with his mother, as always. She's right, Hel. Not the time for extra spending. We've got the mortgage, loans. Loans? Helen asked. My father paid off your last car loan 2 months ago. Stan flushed and looked away. That was a while ago. Things change. On the funeral day, a cold, piercing rain fell. As the coffin was lowered, the ground seemed to give way under Helen's feet. Without her friend Katie gripping her arm, she would have collapsed. Stan stood nearby but felt far away, more attentive to his mother than to his wife. At the repast in the cheap cafeteria Alice insisted on, Alice gave a lofty speech about what a wonderful man Michael had been and how dearly they all loved him. Helen listened, boiling inside at the hypocrisy. Afterward, when the three of them were alone in Michael's apartment, Alice decided it was time for the main act. Helen, sweetheart, she began in a syrupy voice, sitting beside her on the couch. We know how hard this is and want to spare you extra hassle. What hassle? Helen asked. The inheritance. All that paperwork. Clerks, lines. So stressful. Stan and I will handle everything. You just need to sign one document. She pulled a neatly folded sheet from her bag and handed it over. What is this? Helen asked, though she already knew. A waiver of inheritance. Alice said matter-of-factly. You'll renounce it in my favor. It'll be simpler. I'll sell what needs selling. Put the money in a joint account. We'll use it together. Helen stared, unable to believe what she was hearing. Renounce everything her parents had left to her, in favor of a woman who was essentially a stranger. I'm not signing, Helen said firmly. What do you mean you're not? Alice's voice hardened. Don't you trust your own family? I don't have a family anymore, Helen said quietly. My family is in the ground. So that's how it is, Alice snapped, leaping up. You want to grab everything for yourself? And what about your husband? He has rights too. He has no rights, Helen said coldly. This is my father's property, and it comes to me. We'll see about that, Alice hissed. Stan, hear what she's saying? She wants to rob us. Stan, silent until then, came over, pale, hands trembling. Hell, don't do this. Mom wants what's best. Don't fight. Sign it, and everything will be fine. No, Helen repeated. He glanced miserably between her and his mother. He would choose his mother. He always did. Tell her, Alice ordered. Tell her what happens if she refuses. Stan drew a breath. Hell, he said hoarsely. Either you sign, or we get divorced. There it was, the ultimatum, the lowest, cruelest blow. Helen looked at her husband and at the triumphant smile behind him and understood. This was the end. And then she remembered the folder. You'll know when. She knew. Silence rang in the room. Only the autumn rain drummed on the sill. Helen searched Stan's taut, pale face for even a trace of the man she'd loved. She found none. A stranger stood before her, parroting his mother's words. Divorce? She asked evenly. You threatened me with divorce on the day of my father's funeral? I'm not threatening, Stan mumbled, looking away. I just want what's fair. Fair? Helen gave a bitter smile. You call it fair that I give up everything my parents left me, in favor of your mother? It'll be ours, Alice cut in, eyes blazing. We're a family. What's yours is ours. We'll invest, buy a new apartment and a car. You already have a car, Helen reminded her. The one my father helped you buy. And you live in an apartment he mostly paid for. Isn't that enough? So the benefactor starts keeping score, Alice sneered. Don't worry, you won't be left out. You'll live like a queen. I don't want to live like a queen, Helen said. I want peace. And I don't want my parents' memory trampled. Helen stood, cold fury rising. She went to the table where the paper lay. Statement of waiver of inheritance. In Alice's precise bookkeeper's hand, Helen's name and passport details filled the blanks, with Alice Price named as beneficiary. Every detail planned. You left me no choice, Helen, Stan said, even managing a note of injured pride, as if all this were her fault. I don't want a divorce, but if you act like this, against the family. You mean your family, Helen corrected. I was never part of it, just a convenient wallet. Stop it, he snapped. Don't say that. How else should I say it? Her voice broke. My father died 3 days ago, and you're already dividing his estate. Is nothing sacred to you? Family is sacred, Alice declaimed, and you're destroying it with your selfishness. They stood shoulder to shoulder, two predators cornering their prey. In that moment, Helen decided she wouldn't scream or plead. She would play their game, by her rules. She picked up a pen. Alice froze, bright with anticipation. That's my smart girl, she cooed as Helen bent over the paper. No need for scenes. Helen said nothing. She carefully signed her name at the bottom, set the pen down, and straightened. There, she said. I signed. Happy? Stan exhaled in relief. Alice beamed, snatching the sheet and examining it like a winning lottery ticket. That's better, she crowed, waving the document. See, Stan? She's sensible. We're one big happy family now. Helen watched her. Not a caring mother-in-law, but a triumphant huntress devouring her catch. Tea, Helen, Alice said briskly. Make it strong. And you, Stan, go buy a cake. We'll celebrate. The start of a new life. Helen turned and went to her room. Her hands trembled, her heart pounded, but instead of despair, she felt a strange, icy calm. She took out the folder her father had given her. She still hadn't opened it, but she knew. Her salvation was inside. The play wasn't over. This was only Act 1. After Helen signed, the atmosphere changed. Stan and Alice, certain of total victory, stopped even pretending sympathy. They acted like owners, treating Helen as a poor relation they'd graciously taken in. Helen, why is the kitchen a mess? Alice demanded the next morning, though Helen had barely gotten out of bed. You're not working. Clean up. I'm in mourning, Helen said quietly. Mourning or not, the house can't be neglected, Alice snapped. A husband should come home to a clean place and a hot dinner. Stan backed his mother in everything. He barely spoke to Helen except to issue curt chores, then spent evenings with Alice in the kitchen, loudly discussing plans for their new property so Helen would hear. Sell the country house, dump the old apartment, buy a luxury condo with river view, replace Stan's junk car with a black crossover. He'll look like a king. Helen listened from her room without anger now, only the cool curiosity of an entomologist watching insects swarm. Their certainty made them careless. She didn't argue. She played the docile victim, quietly cleaning, cooking, doing laundry. They took her submission at face value. See? Alice told Stan with satisfaction. She's broken. Keep her on a short leash. Meanwhile, Helen lived a secret life. She called the notary, her father's friend, whose contact was in the folder. Mr. Victor Simmons, this is Helen Warren, Michael's daughter. Helen, dear, came the warm, familiar voice. My deepest condolences. Your father was a great man and a true friend. Thank you. I'm calling about the folder he left me." "I know," Victor said. "He called me the day before, told me everything, and asked me to help you." "What's happened?" Helen described the ultimatum and the signed waiver. The notary listened, grunting now and then. "Quite a family your husband's got," he sighed when she finished. "But Michael was a genius. He beat them before the game began." "What should I do?" "Nothing," Victor said calmly. "Sit tight. They'll come. To me. When they bring that paper to formalize the inheritance, that's when the fun starts. The law is on your side." The call steadied her resolve. A few days after the funeral, Stan came to her businesslike. "We need to see a notary to make everything official." "Why?" she asked innocently. "You said my signature was just a formality." "It is, just to avoid questions. Mom found a good notary through friends. Tomorrow at 10. Be ready." Helen nodded obediently. That evening, Alice was in high spirits, even buying expensive champagne. "Tomorrow is the first day of our new rich life," she said, pouring. "To it." "To a new life," Helen murmured, and took a small sip. They didn't grasp her meaning. That night, Helen opened the folder again. A deed of gift transferring all of Michael's property to her, registered a month before his death. And one more document she hadn't told anyone about, not even Victor, her own ace. She put the papers in her bag. Tomorrow would be decisive. Morning was bright and cold. Helen dressed not in morning black, but in a cream pantsuit that made her look like a winner, not a victim. When she entered the kitchen, Stan and Alice froze a second. "Well, someone dressed up," Alice sniped. "For a celebration," Helen said evenly. "For my liberation." They dismissed it as another odd remark. They rode in a taxi in silence. Alice and Stan chatted excitedly about the remodel in their future luxury condo. The notary's office was in an old building downtown. Seeing the sign, Helen barely suppressed a smile. Notary Victor S. Parker. Victor Simmons. In their rush and greed, they hadn't even checked who they were going to. They had led themselves to the scaffold. Victor, a silver-haired man with sharp, kind eyes, greeted them. He nodded politely to Alice and Stan and smiled warmly at Helen. "Please, sit." Alice, too excited to sit first, put Helen's signed waiver on the desk with a flourish. "A waiver of inheritance in my favor. We need to formalize everything." Victor put on his glasses and studied the document for a long time. The old clock ticked loudly. Stan and Alice squirmed, waiting for the verdict. Helen sat still, hands folded. "Yes," Victor said at last, setting the paper aside. "Interesting document. I see Helen's signature." "So?" Alice blurted. "Can we proceed?" "Proceed with what?" he asked mildly. "The inheritance, of course. I'm the sole heir now." Victor removed his glasses and looked over them with a mix of pity and disdain. "I'm afraid I must disappoint you, Ms. Price. This paper," he tapped it, "has no legal force whatsoever. First, a waiver of inheritance must be executed in a specific statutory form, and only before a notary. Second, and more importantly, one can only renounce what actually exists. In this case," he spread his hands, "there is no estate to inherit." "What do you mean, no estate?" Stan burst out. "The apartment, the house, the car, the bank accounts did not belong to your late father-in-law at the time of his death," Victor said, opening a drawer and taking out another folder, the one Helen had given him. "A month before his passing, Michael Warren executed a deed of gift transferring all his movable and immovable property, free of charge, to his only daughter, Helen Warren." He laid the registered deed on the desk. "It's duly recorded with the registry and has full legal effect. There is, therefore, nothing to inherit from Michael." Silence fell. Alice wheezed. Stan's face turned ashen. They understood. Their grand plan had collapsed. Helen watched them calmly. No gloating, only quiet satisfaction. Justice had been done. Her father had ensured it. Alice recovered first, twisting with rage. "This is a forgery," she shrieked, stabbing a finger at the deed. "He was sick, out of his mind. She tricked him, exploited his condition. It's fraud." "Please calm down," Victor said sternly. "Michael was of sound mind and memory when he signed. I have a medical certification from the same day. Your accusations are baseless and offensive." "I'll sue," Alice ranted. "You're all in on it. Her con artist father." "Mom, stop," Stan whispered, deflated. "Don't you dare silence me," she snapped. "We've been robbed, brazenly robbed, and you sit there." She turned on Helen. Happy now? Proud of yourself? Helen let them vent. She wanted their true faces on display. I don't understand, Stan finally said, looking up at Helen. Why didn't you just tell me? Would it have changed anything? Helen's voice was calm, with steel in it. Would you have stopped humiliating me? Stopped counting my dying father's money? Stopped threatening me with divorce? He had no answer. No, she said. You would have looked for another way to take it. I gave you a chance to show there was something human left in you. You didn't take it. How dare you? Alice flared. I dare, Helen said. Because now I speak to you not as your powerless daughter-in-law, but as the owner of everything you were drooling over. Game over. You lost. Alice collapsed into a coughing fit. Stan sank, head in hands. And that's not all, Helen added, taking a small device from her bag. She pressed a button. The room filled with familiar voices. Sign the waiver in favor of my mother, or I'll file for divorce. She's broken. Now she'll be compliant. Why should I bust my back for peanuts? I'm a rich heir now. With each phrase, Stan and Alice grew paler. Blackmail, psychological pressure, pushing me toward a breakdown, Helen narrated. Plenty for the court, not only for the divorce but possibly for criminal charges. Victor nodded. Your evidentiary file is ironclad, Ms. Warren. Alice stared at Helen with real fear for the first time. She was facing not a timid orphan, but a cold, calculating opponent, trained by her father. What do you want? Stan whispered. I want a divorce. Immediately. And I want you both out of my life. Forever. She turned to Victor. That's all for today. Of course, he said, rising. And as for you two, he added to the prices, I suggest you find a good attorney. Quickly. You'll need one. They left Stan and Alice sitting among the ruins of their fantasy. On the sunlit street, Victor squinted at the sky. Congratulations on your trial by fire, Helen. Your father would be proud. Thank you, she said. I only did what I promised a friend, he replied. You and your dad did the heavy lifting. He left you not just assets, he left you armor and taught you to use it. Helen didn't go home. She wandered the city, thinking. The pain of loss remained, a dull ache, but fear and helplessness were gone. She blocked Stan and Alice's numbers, called Katie, and told her everything. You're my hero, Katie said. What now? Live, Helen answered simply. She found a top divorce lawyer and a realtor. She would sell the mortgage department and move into her father's house. She spent hours drafting a plan. Divorce, sale, move, resume work, maybe open the landscape studio she'd dreamed of. She had the means, the will, and most importantly, freedom. At dawn the next day, someone rang her doorbell. 7 a.m. Stan. Alone, unshaven, haggard. Helen didn't open. He pleaded through the door. She called her lawyer. Do not open. Call the police. She did. A patrol arrived. Stan wilted, babbled about a family misunderstanding, and was fined with strict warnings to stay away. That decided Helen. No half measures. At the meeting, her lawyer laid out two options for Stan and Alice. Go to court and face charges for blackmail, plus likely a minimal payout to Stan since Helen's father had funded nearly everything, or sign a voluntary division agreement transferring the apartment fully to Helen, in exchange for her dropping the blackmail case and forgiving half of a separate debt under the gift arrangement. They chose the second, signed with trembling hands, and had 24 hours to vacate. The next day, the keys lay under the doormat, and the apartment was unexpectedly clean. On the table, a note in Stan's hand. Mailbox key. Goodbye. A week later, the court dissolved the marriage at the first hearing. Helen quickly sold the apartment, paid off the mortgage, and moved to her father's house. The memories there warmed rather than wounded. She rebuilt the garden into a work of art, posted photos on a portfolio site, and orders followed. Neighbors, then their friends. Within a year, she had a small firm, a couple of assistants, a month-long wait list, and a new life. Stan's debt repayments were garnished automatically. Rumor had it Alice had withered into a cranky old woman. Helen felt neither anger nor pity. They were just shadows from a past she'd released. Her days filled with work, friends, theater, books, yoga, and travel. One warm summer evening she sat on her porch over herbal tea, watching the sunset. The gate creaked. A tall, kind-eyed man stood on the path. Her new neighbor, a surgeon who'd bought the house across the street. Good evening, he said shyly. I'm Andrew. I just wanted to say your garden is incredible. I admire it every day. Thank you, Helen smiled. It's my work. Would you like some tea? They talked late into the night about books, music, travel, work. Maybe it would become love. Maybe just a pleasant memory. Either way, she no longer feared opening her heart. She had survived betrayal without losing her faith in people. This story is a hymn to a woman's strength and dignity. Even after the darkest night, dawn comes. If you believe anyone can find a way out, even from the bleakest situation, like and subscribe. Your support inspires more true, moving stories.